So I think what I'm going to try to do is get this into display mode and talk a little bit about the background for silencing the inner critic. So I have two authors that I really, really love in this space. Well, actually three. So number one is Tara Moore, who has written the book Playing Big. And I love that book. I love Tara Moore. I've just become a super big fan of her. The second books have been written by um, Ellen Hendrickson, on how to be enough, and there's another one on you are enough. And those are really amazing books as well. And then my go-to for women leaders, and many of you on this call are women leaders, my go-to is always Marshall Goldsmith and Sally Helgeson on How Women Rise, because even though they don't call it the inner critic, they talk a lot about what kind of messages we send to ourselves. So let's dig in. So this is a webinar that's part of the Global Coaching Network as well as Global IOC. So what's our why? We're going to have a coaching conversation. Conversation implies you're going to talk to me as well, okay? It's the opportunity to sharpen our saw about how do we silence the inner critic and how that fits into our own coaching practice with our clients. And then the integration, hopefully, of new material for you as a leader, and maybe something you can introduce into your organization. Tools and resources for growth. You're going to have a lot of those by the end of the conversation today. And by the way, this is a recorded call. And so if you find that I talk fast, which I do, I own that, it will be available at our website. So you can go back and listen to it as often as you want. There are blogs that I've written about the inner critic, and there is a book review on Playing Big, and I think there's one on Ellen Hendrickson's as well. So this is available to you. And for those of you that are members of the Global Coaching Network, you are getting CEUs for today. So what are the goals? Okay, first of all, we all have an inner critic, and it's okay. We want to normalize it as a human experience, and that we all understand that we have it, and it's just part of us. We're going to explore a little bit of where it comes from. We're going to learn strategies to quiet it. We're not going to make it go away. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. It's not going to go away, but we're going to find ways to manage and quiet it and build a kinder inner narrative. And when you leave today, you're going to have tools for sustainable confidence and courage as you move forward in dealing with your inner critic. So first of all, we're going to normalize the inner critic because it's part of everyone. We think people don't have it, but they do. It's a protective but limiting inner voice. It talks to us all the time. It narrates fear, doubt, and self-judgment. It's universal. It's rooted in self-protection. So it's trying to help us. It's trying to keep us from having any kind of problems. So it's critical, it's judgmental, it's fear-based. In Tara Moore's book on Playing Big, she was talking to an audience, and what came up in the audience is that the inner critic message came from many sources. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but it comes a lot from our moms, okay? And so when I listened to this yesterday and I heard my mother's inner criticism as being protective, I had this shift. I understood that my mom's criticism of me wasn't really to put me down, but rather it was a way of helping me look at, try to keep me protected. Like, don't try, you might fail messages were really to protect me from if I did fail. And so that's kind of what our inner critic's doing. It's trying to protect us. And it's trying to keep us away from shame, failure, or rejection. So we don't have a lot of courage if we give into this idea that we are shameful, we are a failure, or we are rejected. It's not weakness. It's part of who we are, and we have to work with it. And what does it sound like? You're not ready, you'll mess up. Who do you think you are? That imposter syndrome. When I was in Greece, I was talking to Marilena about the imposter syndrome kind of creeping up a little bit because I have two books coming out this summer, and it's kind of like, who do I think I am to write two books, right? And I'm like, because I'm Dr. Peggy Marshall, it's okay. So what are the inner critic types that come from Tara Moore introduces us, but everybody talks about these inner types. And if you do anything with Ellen Hendrickson, you'll know that she focuses a lot on perfection, the perfectionist. And what does that mean exactly, to be a perfectionist? And how do we live into that? And done is better than perfect. And we don't always think about how important it is to be done and not simply perfect. Okay, so then we have the underminer and we have the taskmaster pushing us to do more, 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 more. Can we do more? The people pleaser. I love this one. This is my favorite, and it's the one I engage in most often. I got to make sure people are happy. And I've had clients tell me their goal is to make sure people are happy. But is it? Or is it to make sure there's balance in our lives? The inner rule keeper. Okay, that's a rule. Don't break it. I don't have too much of that. And when you think about your reflection prompt, do you see yourself more in one of these five, or is there another one that shows up more frequently when you find yourself talking to yourself? My early career was in working with stress management and working with people, and I loved working with women around stress management because we have so many things we're trying to juggle. And one of the things that we talked about is this inner critic. And I would say that the inner critic is so mean. In fact, I was listening to Ellen Hendrickson on my walk today, and she was talking about that the inner critic goes to the mean university. I was like, yeah, mine went to the mean university and got straight A's. In fact, she had better than a 4.0 in being mean. And when we get up in the morning and we walk into the bathroom and we look at ourselves in the mirror and we say, you are fat, stupid, and ugly, you need to lose weight, there's always something wrong when we look in the mirror. I want you to look in the mirror and tell yourself how much you love you and how much you love yourself. And in women's workshops, I would say that I would make women say, I love myself. I would say, okay, we have to say, I love myself. And it's really hard in a group to say, I love myself, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to find ways to love ourselves despite the inner critic. So what's the cost? The cost of listening to the inner critic is burnout. We're constantly trying to prove we're okay. We're constantly trying to prove our worth. And we can't do that simply. It's very complex. We got to do more and more and more and more. Another cost is playing small. That is why Tara wrote the book on playing big. When I was in between my dissertation and my first job, one of the things that I did, one of the mantras I had is, I want to play big. Okay, stop playing small. We have to take ourselves out of that small. Perfection done is better than perfection, and fear blocks momentum. And so we have to say, what is the fear about being imperfect? Okay, it's not going to be perfect. We can't be perfect. So what about getting it done and not focusing on perfection? Chronic anxiety leads to internal pressure. Chronic anxiety, when we're listening to the inner critic, is ticking off all of those internal processes of adrenaline, cortisol. It's just really stressing us out. Loss of joy and authenticity. So we forget all the wonderful things that happen for us and to us. And so it drowns out the amazing things that happen. And so listening to it means we're not appreciating and not enjoying those aspects of us and ourselves. And finally, it doesn't protect us. It keeps us locked in a prison, and we're going to get out of that prison today. So now this is where I have so much fun. Okay, so something has just happened that is keeping we'll go back in. So we'll go back into this. Something happens on Zoom. I'm going to figure that one out too one of these days. It locks it up. Okay, so now why would we silence the inner critic? Okay, we want to silence the inner critic because it undermines our confidence. It fuels perfectionism and it limits growth. Those are the three reasons we want to silence it. But I'm going to contend that we don't silence it, we live with it. We teach ourselves how to live with it. So from silencing to shifting it, we're not going to eliminate the inner critic. It's not going to happen. Okay, what you want to do is take away its authority. And we're going to talk about that later in this session. You need to recognize it as a part of you, but not you, not the whole of you. It's a part of you. Fear is going to be with us. Shift the inner narrative from the fears that we're feeling to support of ourselves and invite rather your inner ally. Then that's what Tara Moore calls our inner mentor. So the inner critic versus inner wisdom, inner critic versus the inner mentor. The inner critic is fear-based and rigid. When we talk to our inner wisdom, it's grounded and flexible. The inner critic is harsh, judgmental. And when I was talking about the mean university, you say things to yourself that you would never allow somebody to say to you, and yet you allow them. Okay. And that's where we have to catch ourselves. Would I say this to another human? And if the answer is no, we have to say, what do we want to do with this? The inner mentor is kind and discerning. I want to call the inner person your inner coach. Many of you on this call are coaches. I want you to think about how you would coach a client and do that with yourself. So the inner coach, the inner critic doesn't want to make a mistake. You know, the thing of it is, I love making the first mistake of the year because it's over. And usually in the first 5 days of the year, I'll make a mistake. Okay, I made a mistake. Now I don't have to go the whole year without making a mistake. I'm not avoiding mistakes. They happen. Mistakes mean you're trying, you're experimenting. Things are moving in your life. Your inner coach encourages you to embrace the growth, that learning that comes from any mistakes you make. Inner critic says, "Who do you think you are?" And your inner coach says, "You've got this." The inner critic shames you into not talking, and the inner coach encourages your voice. So, as Tara would say, let's activate our inner mentor. Let's visualize the future version of yourself that is wise, grounded, and brave. What would my inner mentor say to me? What would your inner coach say to you? Use this vision of this coach that sits on your shoulder and counteracts the critic voice with a grounded perspective. We're not going to get rid of it, but we're going to talk to our inner critic about, okay, what's the evidence that that's true? You know, one of my favorite coaching questions is, what would have to be true for that to be true? What is the evidence that would have to be true for that to be true? And the inner coach is going to build confidence, calm, and long-term identity for us. So where does the inner critic come from? It comes from the negativity bias. For those of you who've been through my coaching classes, you know I talk about Rick Hansen all the time, and we are programmed to be negative. And we're programmed to be negative because it kept us alive. So we self-monitor in terms of what's going on in the group. We couldn't live without the group, so we self-monitor to make sure we're okay in the group. Hyper-awareness of mistakes is tied to survival because it keeps us from dying. And so the internal voice was trying to keep us alive, but now it has become a misguided protector. So it also comes from what I said earlier, caregivers, teachers, peers, oh, you better not do that. It's internalized beliefs about worth, ability, and how lovable we are. Tara Moore and Elizabeth Gilbert, and you will hear me talk about her later in Big Magic. The inner critic forms a response to fear. We are responding to what we feel in fear. And then Brene Brown, all of her work on shame is amazing. And it talks about shame takes root in silence, secrecy, and judgment. It's also cultural and gender. How we should respond to the socialized expectations to determine how we self-monitor. Women are taught to prioritize approval, perfection, and sacrifice, self-sacrifice. Helgeson and Goldsmith, I talked about earlier, gendered patterns of self-criticism in leadership are very clear about what, who am I to lead? What do I have? What's my capabilities for leadership? And the inner critic magnifies messages of not enough across all domains. So trauma and psychological defense, this is also where some of the inner critic comes from, emerging as a survival strategy. Britt Frank talks about the critic as part of the brain trying to keep us safe. I keep coming back to the protector keeping us safe. So how do you balance that? Self-protection gets misinterpreted as self-sabotage. You can have a self-protector that encourages you to ooch. Remember scooting and inching from decisive? Your self-protection can encourage you to ooch. We just don't shut us down. Healing begins with curiosity and judgment. Why is my inner critic talking to me this way? So now I'm going to give you a chance to talk to yourself. You have some background. I'm going to put you in some breakout rooms. We're going to talk about what are some common patterns, that situations where people tend to hear their inner critic. So you can talk about yourself or you can talk about clients and others. Okay, I'm keeping this psychologically safe for the group. What are some common situations where people tend to hear the inner critic? Like before presenting, making a mistake or receiving feedback. Then I'm sorry, you need that, don't you? And then you could talk about the second question. And the second question is, what kinds of messages or phrases do inner critics often use? And which one seems familiar or universal? So talk about yourself, talk about others. You have about 5 minutes it's going to be quick, but just throw some ideas out so we can have a conversation. Remember, this is about conversations when you come back to the room. Okay, I'm going to do this. Here we go. Don't make me call on you. Okay, thank you, Diana.
Hi, Dr. Maggie. Well, I had the pleasure of interacting with Rachel, and she and I both suffer from perfectionism and then overtasking something and doing procrastination. So we have this wonderful trifecta with new challenges and dealing with this. Is this going to be good enough? Is this the way it was delivered? Was the way it was delivered enough? So it's nice to know I don't sit in this boat alone. Rachel, thank you so much for the conversation. And we really just talked about, asking clarifying questions before we dive into projects and lead with an eager yes, making sure we understand assignments, in those moments of critiquing ourselves, putting it away, and then dealing with it later so it doesn't create that procrastination and inability to perform, and then kind of going and reflecting on, well, what is the story I'm telling myself and what's reality? So putting things into perspective at a time when emotionally and mentally I can handle it, not in the moment that my anxiety is its all-time high.
That's a good habit, because sometimes when we're in the midst of it, it's hard to calm ourselves down and bring that inner coach forward. But once we're calmed down, then we can reflect and go, is this the path I really want to go? I love it. Who else wants to share? I'm going to pick on the men, so one of you better talk. Come on, Vessel, talk.
We are both from South Africa. So it's
I
nice to
know.
see Gerard as well. No, I was with Sapna and Catherine. I hope I've got
Karen.
the name right.
Karen.
And we had so much fun talking to each other that we didn't get to the question really. but
I'm not
I think,
surprised.
but I think getting back to the question, that one realizes, I fully agree with you that we need to embrace the inner critic and we need to learn from it. And we need, I think Catherine said, we need to make sure that we change it to the PEA, the positive emotional attractors, once it surfaces. And that's so true. So rather than trying to get rid of it, say, what can we learn from it? And how can we grow from it? So it's part of your growth journey.
I love it. Do you know how much it warms my heart when you all come to these sessions around the world and talk about the principles we've been learning in coaching? Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. And that's where we go with the inner coach, in the PEA and out of NEA. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to dig back in, and if you didn't get a chance to talk, we're going to do another breakout, so you'll be able to talk to us. So what do we need to do? We need to name and externalize the voice. Alan Hendrickson says, labeling the voice reduces its power. So the perfectionist, oh, there you are, the judger. Do I want to talk with you right now? Do I want to be with you now? So you give the critic a name. It creates the space between you and what you're thinking about, and it helps you respond instead of react. So Kristen Neff talks about self-compassion practices. Treat yourself the way you would treat a close friend. If your close friend was feeling a little bit unsupported, you would step into support. If you're feeling a little bit unsupported, support yourself. But do not talk to yourself from mean university. Talk to yourself as you would somebody as a client or a close friend. And again, I love that you brought up PEA. Use positive emotional attractors in the language you're using. Acknowledge that we have a shared humanity. So many times when I'm coaching people, I'm like, you're not alone. We all do this. This happens to others. And practice grounding and self-soothing techniques. So what are the things that ground you? Breathing grounds us. Exercise grounds us. Reflection can ground us. So find some techniques that really work for you that can help in grounding. And then, of course, we got to go to the mind. Let's cognitively reframe it. Let's challenge those thoughts, all or nothing, catastrophizing. You know, one of the questions I like to ask myself is, when have I been in this bind before? And how did I get out of it? How long did it take me? What tools did I use? Ask yourself, is what you're thinking helpful? Is it true? This is where Byron Katie comes in. Is it true? Is it absolutely true? How would you know this is true? More importantly, how do you feel when you think this is true? So you go through the Byron Katie questions. Again, we're going to talk about Tara Moore and say, I paused. I paused because go back in to that and finish the ideas. Inner critic, inner coach, and replace shame with curiosity and possibility. You were not seeing my presentation before, were you? Oh my gosh. One of these days, I'm going to be a big girl when it comes to presentations. Okay. Right now, I'm still learning to deal with Zoom. So create psychological safety for ourselves. Affirmations that are true. Another author that you'll see at the end is Nedra Tawwab, who talks about setting boundaries. If you're a people pleaser, setting boundaries becomes so critical. Build a library of 5 or 6 phrases you can say to yourself all the time. I'm this big neuroplasticity person, and that we can change our brains and we can change what we think, and what we think changes our brain. So now we've got this rhythm of library of inner phrases that we tell ourselves. They start to become real for us. And so how do you build that library and make it work for you? And make room for perfection and learning. Okay, there's a reflection prompt. We're going to skip it because I want to get to the tools for transformation. So what are those tools? My favorite, many of you have heard this from me because as we talk about that inner critic, we talk about my it doubt. And my it doubt sits on my behind, and this is what she looks like. And I got her in South Africa about 2 years ago, and she is allowed to talk to me after I'm done working. Okay. She's not allowed to talk to me while I'm working. Just this issue that I had with the Zoom slides. She's not allowed to talk to me about it. Okay. At the end of today, I might reflect and say, what do I need to do with that? But she's not allowed to talk to me right now. Okay. And Elizabeth Gilbert has the message. And so I learned this from her book, Big Magic. Fear is always going to be with you on the journey. We have to accept that fear is part of life, but it doesn't get to drive, choose the snacks, or touch the radio. So one of the techniques I have taught many clients is fear has to get in the back seat. So you got to get in the back seat, and you are not allowed to touch the steering wheel, or talk to me while I'm driving. I need to focus on driving, but you can be with me. And we acknowledge that fear is part of the human experience and that it's a natural companion to creativity and growth, but it doesn't get to decide for us. The inner critic, we've talked about this a lot as perfectionism. If you got a perfectionism thing going on for you, it's part of your inner critic. And we have to talk to it about, okay, but I want done. I want done, not perfect. So let's focus on getting done. You don't need permission to start. So just go ahead and start. So when we talk about quieting the inner critic from the work of Ellen Hendrickson, she talks about, remember, the inner critic is trying to keep you from failure, embarrassment, or rejection. It's not the enemy. It's doing what it's supposed to do. It's just not very good at it. So name the critic. We talked about that already. Give your inner critic a name. That's why I have an it down. I had this idea that I haven't been able to work with yet, but we'd have women's groups and we'd have all kinds of material. We all have leftover material. Well, many of us do, right? Or you have to go to the fabric store and get some material. And then I would have a pattern and we would build like a little gingerbread doll and make it ours. And that's our it doll. And then we would we would have compassion for the it doll. So have compassion for your inner critic because it's trying to help, but externalize it and depersonalize it by giving it a name. So it's it to me, it's my it doll. But Tara Mark has workshops where people have given it true names, okay? So you might give it a name of a graduate of Bean University. I would be tempted to, but I already have an it doll, so I can't change the name, okay? So use evidence. You know, when we're working with our clients, we're using evidence. Challenge inner criticism with facts, not feelings. Use cognitive reframing. So what are some reframing tools for facts? What are the facts? When have I succeeded before? What would I be telling a friend about this? You would not talk to your friend the way you're talking to yourself. So bring that into your consciousness. Accept discomfort. The inner critic makes us uncomfortable. Avoidance of the inner critic gives it more power. When we accept that it's there, oh, here you are, there you are again. And so Ellen Hendrickson talks about the 90-second rule, where we sit with that discomfort for 90 seconds and we let the emotions pass instead of reacting. So can we sit with the discomfort we're feeling from our inner critic? Be your authentic self. The more we try to hide who we are, the more difficult it is to control this inner critic. So authenticity, being yourself, weakens its grip. Perfection isn't persuasive. Realness is. How can I be my best self? What does my best self look like? Maybe you can't be your best self because of some environmental factors, but what would be one step in the direction of being your authentic self? And use a tone and message you'd offer someone else. As we keep saying that, right? That should be a clear learning for you to take away. So practice small acts of bravery. The inner critic gets louder before growth. Exposure builds courage and quiets fear. The courage ladder. What are the small steps we can do to get to the to get to the end of performance that we're looking for? Like, don't think of it as a one big goal, but what are those milestones that now become steps that are doable? And start with the lowest rung. What's the easiest thing to do? And go do it. And then celebrate. I'm such a big person on celebration. We really need to celebrate. So what are more tools? So you're not going to get away from silencing the inner critic with me without talking about Goldsmith and Helgeson. Okay, How Women Rise is a classic and needs to be part of how we coach. So name the habit. I love this one. Separate the identity from behavior. Instead of saying something I'm bad at, I have a habit of minimizing my accomplishments. So what's your habit? That's your habit. It's not you. So how do we move from habit to changing the habit of identity from to separate your identity out rather? So anyone who knows me, anyone who's worked with me, you know you have to journal. You have to write things down. Okay, writing things down is really important. It doesn't have to be a book. It just has to be written down. So note the inner criticism as behaviors and habits. It's not you. These are things I've done to protect myself. These are things I've done to avoid. Creates room for a non-judgmental change. What have you been doing? What isn't working? It's a behavior you are engaging in. It's not you. Challenge the need to be perfect. Okay. Every single person talks about the inner critic as wanting us to be perfect. The perfection trap fuels inner criticism. Our high standards often become blocks to momentum. So ask yourself, what are the standards? Do they still apply to you? Do you still want them in your life? And is it good enough? Helping people really think through if something's good enough or not is tough. But what does good enough look like? What does done look like? And then if you want to go back and edit, that's fine. For those of you who've been on calls earlier with me, you know that I'm in the process of writing 2 books. One's at the publisher, the other will soon be there. The first book I rewrote 4 times. Because I wrote it, I added stories, I edited, and I woke up one day and I said, I'm bored. I'm bored with this book. This book is boring. Okay. And that wasn't my inner critic. It was the reality. Okay. It was too academic. It was too clinical. So then I wrote it from my authentic self. And I really understand that authentic self. I allowed myself to be me to write it. And then I got it out. And now I love the book. And if nobody else loves it, it's okay because I love the book. And so ask yourself, is it good enough to meet the goal? What you've done, is it good enough to meet the goal? And avoid refining, writing 4 times. I'm not writing it 4 times. I wrote it once. I'm editing the second book. Due to self-doubt alone. Trust yourself. Trust your inner coach to give you the information you need to move forward. Let your accomplishments speak. I want to know what you're proud of. I want to know what your journey has been. I want to know what you've achieved because we're afraid. We've been taught to be humble. You know, we should be seen and not heard if you are a boomer. So, how do you take a moment and say, what are my successes? How do I celebrate my successes? Keep a list of running wins, feedback, and impact. What you should have is a board of directors that mirror your inner coach. So who are those people that are also part of your inner coaching team, and that give you feedback that you can really run with, and review when the inner critic says it's not enough. Stop ruminating, start acting. Stop second guessing, take action. Limit decision time when you can to no more than 48 hours. Move from thinking to doing. We can always take one small step. What is that one small step we can take? Okay. Okay, we've got peer support. Who's going to help you? What are those feedback loops that you're going to hear from other people? What are my strengths? Where did I underestimate myself? Make sure your board of directors is an amazing team of people who help you support yourself, but also support you. Journaling and pattern awareness. This is big. What is the pattern the inner critic shows up as in your life? We all have patterns, and we have to break those patterns. So when and how does the inner critic show up? identify the themes, the triggers, and the emotional tone. Journaling, we have to write things down, folks. We really do have to write things down because it then becomes embodied and embedded in our brain. And it gives you insight to say, oh, this is when it shows up most. So how am I going to think about in the future when the pattern starts to emerge? What do I want to do with that pattern? And then own your intentions. Focus on purpose, not potential and judgment. Okay. The tool, intentional alignment. Before action, what do I want to contribute? Why does this matter to me? The intention alignment. Why is it important what I'm about to do? And I think we can own our intentions in quieting that inner critic. So I promised you a breakout. I know I went fast, and I really understand that I'm just briefly touching on all these ideas, but guess what? You get to go play with them again. So I'm putting you back in the breakout. I'm giving you about 7 minutes this time, and you have to come back and talk to me. And by the way, don't forget, I see all your names, and you can't take them off while you're in group. It won't allow you. Okay, so stop the recording.
Also like the sorry, Vessel like the 90-second that one where you reflect. But
Yeah.
Rachel and I was saying in our line of work with the kids, we don't have 90 seconds. The kids will go crazy if we stop for that long. So we've got about 30 seconds if we're lucky. And but I think the one that I like the most is the trying to remember that the inner critic is the protector, and trying to maybe renaming the inner critic is a good idea, and then just trying to remember that it's trying to help and not hurt.
Right.
So
And you can
yeah.
even talk to it that way, Yvonne. That was awesome to say, I know you're trying to help, but this isn't helping me right now. So this is what would help me. I mean, have a conversation with it. I love that. It's awesome. Okay, last group. I know 2 of you who are in that group. Talk to me.
Yeah, hey, I'm Diana. I was in with Diana and Sapna, and the tool that really hooked for me was the intention tool. And it was wonderful because Diana shared her little post-it that she has on her desk about being intentional in her work every day, and how she feels like that really kind of helps her with her own impact in what she does. And I told her I was going to steal that. And I shared what's on my screen that I see every day, which is be a finisher, which for me is beyond the being done, in that I can get something finished, meaning that I can then let it go, so that I don't have that emotional kind of attachment, and that can weigh me down and make me feel like I haven't really done enough, or it's not good enough, or right, I can just let that go, finish it, and move on to the next thing. It doesn't always work, but it's there, and I try. So I'm going to try to implement more intention in that, so that I can be more actionable. So
That's awesome. Awesome. I love the conversations. And everyone tells me that the best part of class is being together and talking about your ideas and the idea sharing. So I love that. Thank you all for being so gracious to share. As we wrap up, that we are talking about, oh, you know what? I'm not sharing. I'm doing that thing again. I know. Okay. So now I'm sharing. As we wrap up, we're doing talking about the things we talked about today. Tara Moore in Playing Big, Kristen Neff in Self-Compassion, Susan David in Emotional Agility, Helgeson and Goldsmith, How Women Rise, Nedra Tawwab doing from her Setting Boundaries and Finding Peace, and always Brene Brown. So a final takeaway and prompt is, what will you do differently this week when your inner critic shows up? And how can you meet your inner critic with clarity, compassion, or courage? And then a quick final announcement. We have a coaching research conference coming up October 1st and 2nd. More on that at Global IOC. Webinars return on September 3rd. We have 2 upcoming programs. Detached from Drama is a 4-week program that runs July 9th through 30th. It's really, it should say 11 to 1. It's a 2-hour program. We're also doing DISC Values certification. We have 4 sessions there running July 15th through August 5th. And then we have a major program on sustaining impact, which is part of the book. Go to the website. There is a free 45-item assessment to talk about where you lose momentum and energy in sustaining impact. So it's free, and you can kind of get an idea of what you need to do to build more momentum for the end of the year. And I went 1 minute over. I so appreciate everybody who's been on this call today. You are such an important part of my tribe. I really love seeing you, and seeing people from all over the world today has been wonderful. Have a great rest of your day, and talk nicely to yourself. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.